was a dark and stormy autumn day, much like this one, when I first heard the tale of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. I was in elementary school, and a storm had rolled in, keeping the class inside for recess. The teacher used it as an opportunity to read us a story, which was the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Something about the dark atmosphere outside, combined with the spooky story, embedded it in my mind as one of the more terrifying things I had ever encountered. To this day, no image chills me more than the mere thought of seeing a headless corpse walking about. There's just something deeply wrong and disturbing about the image, which is perhaps a part of what has made this story such a cornerstone of not only our own American folklore, but also that of our ancestors back in the Old World. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving is one of the recognized classics of early American literature. Set in 1790 in the early days of colonial America, it's a story which speaks to the wild, untamed nature of the land that these early settlers found themselves faced with. A vast, impenetrable, unknowable wilderness which stretched endlessly before them, holding God only knew what terrors. Now, for the record, I did my senior English thesis on how beliefs and superstitions of these early American immigrants may have affected our own local urban legends. My example being Wisconsin's Beast of Bray Road. In this video, I'd like to briefly discuss the themes present in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, as well as other early American literature, and how this figure of the Headless Horseman, in particular, may have deeper mythological origins than we think. Perhaps this terrifying ghost who rides forth on his horse each night, breaking the boundaries between our world and the next, could trace his inspirations all the way back to Odin, riding forth on Sleipnir to lead the Wild Hunt. Now, I'll link my video I did sometime last year about Odin and his connections to the Wild Hunt. The tiny hamlet of Sleepy Hollow in particular was renowned amongst the local Dutch population for its spooky atmosphere and legends of its ghosts and hauntings. Some residents would say that the land around Sleepy Hollow had always been home to strange occurrences. As Irving himself wrote, some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement. Others that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered. But its most famous, or infamous, ghost by far is the Headless Horseman, or Galloping Hessian of the Hollow, as they sometimes called him. Now, Washington Irving most likely based the story of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow on not just a rumored death of a Hessian mercenary which occurred in the area during the Revolutionary War, but also on similar folk tales from European folklore that he encountered in his travels there. There's the Irish Dullahan, or Dark Man, a headless spirit who rides a horse, carrying his head under one arm and wielding a whip made from a human spine. But the identity of the horseman as a Hessian or German mercenary points not only to their fierce reputation amongst the American colonialists, but also the large number of these ghostly figures which can be found throughout Germany. These revenants seemed doomed to wander the earth, perhaps trying to atone for some sin, and it was said that even a mere touch from them could be deadly. Now, according to Wikipedia, Irving also likely drew some of his inspiration from these folktales that he found when traveling throughout Europe, particularly those tales which can be found grouped amongst the legends of the Rubizal, found in a book called Volksmärchen der Deutschen, or Folktales of the Germans, a version of which I did manage to find in an English collection called Popular Tales and Romances of the Northern Nations, which you can find on Google. Rubizal, it is noted, is a mountain giant and nature guardian type figure who is also called Lord of the Mountain, Treasure Keeper, and Prince of the Gnomes. With good humans who are respectful or whom he just takes particular interest in, he can grant boons or lead you to his treasure, while those who anger him will get swift vengeance. Rubizal is also a sorcerer with power over the weather, and often a trickster-like figure as well, who can send lightning, thunder, and fog down from the mountain. Like Odin, he's also known to wear a gray robe and to lead the wild hunt. One tale that I found in this collection makes specific reference to wizards riding to the Blocksberg Mountain on Walpurgis Night in order to hold their Sabbath there, which is also famously depicted at the end of Fantasia. In another story, The Bottle Imp, a man acquires a cursed genie, and while trying to rid himself of it, he encounters a formidable and mysterious horseman on the road. There came riding upon a large, black, wild-looking steed, a man of gigantic figure and exceedingly terrific countenance. He was attired in a deep blood-red garment. So great was his horror, expecting every instant to behold the apparition's mantle expand itself into a pair of bloody wings, and his steed to assume a more terrific, spectral appearance, breathing forth infernal flames from its nostrils, and lastly, that the monster would carry off his wretched soul to the regions of eternal misery. But the ghastly horseman said, in somewhat milder voice, and with less appalling mien, "I perceive for whom you take me, yet be comforted, for I am not he. I rather present myself to rescue you, if so may be, from his power." The sorcerer, who I assume here is being mistaken for the devil himself, then devises some very Odin and clever-like ways of helping this man to arrange a set of circumstances to solve his problem. Then, the blood-red horseman, having mounted on his steed's back, it began to crawl up the perpendicular sides of the rock, just as a fly does up a wall, and disappeared forever. In the tale, The Enchanted Castle, the castle, which used to be at Königsberg, is said to be haunted by the appearance of a spectral horse and carriage, which ride forth each night at midnight, all of its passengers missing their heads. In another tale, a man encounters a wizard in a graveyard, riding a coal-black horse, who performs necromancy. I found it interesting as well that the preface for this book states, "Belief in supernatural agents has its native home among mountains and deserts and snows, and in short, wherever society is broken into small masses and detached from the general world." This was definitely the case of Sleepy Hollow and of many places in the days of the early American frontier, which was a wholly different and unfamiliar land than that which settlers had left behind. This was a vast expanse of dark wilderness, for the most part untamed or wholly untouched by what they would call civilization. It further also, in my mind, emphasizes that early Germanic and Northern worldview that we see in Norse mythology and in Teutonic and Germanic myths and culture, wherein the world can be separated into these two categories. The Innengard, or the Inner Guard, which were the bounds within which civilized areas are contained and humanity lives in relative safety, and the Utrost, or Utgard, which were all those places which lie beyond the safe bounds of human settlements, dark and dangerous to whomever dared to explore them. It's in part, I think, what led to the superstitious beliefs behind the Salem witch trials, stemming from the puritanical view that the wilderness, being the antithesis of the safe and controlled setting of the village, was therefore a place of wickedness and evil, where witches would go to meet the devil. It was his abode, and therefore to be either avoided or conquered and tamed. Now, to return to the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow, he's said to be a decapitated Hessian soldier, and may indeed have been based loosely on the discovery of just such a headless corpse, which was found in Sleepy Hollow after a battle of the Revolutionary War, and buried by the Van Tassel family in an unmarked grave. Irving may also have chosen to make his Headless Horseman a Hessian mercenary, not just because of the fear that they inspired in those who had experienced the Revolutionary War, but also, I think, because of these Germanic tales which influenced Irving when he wrote Legends of Sleepy Hollow. In these original tales, specific mention of wizards riding forth on Walpurgisnacht speaks of the traditions and beliefs surrounding the Wild Hunt, which in many cases, as I said in my video, is said to be led by Odin himself. Could it be that this mysterious ghostly horseman, who appears in these German folk tales to aid mortals just as often as to frighten them, is none other than Odin himself? It's certainly said that anyone who finds themselves out alone when the Wild Hunt is riding may find himself swept up in the chase to hunt or be hunted, and this seems to have been the case with Ichabod Crane and the Hessian horseman. A similar encounter is even related earlier in the story of Sleepy Hollow, in which the tale was told of old Brower, a most heretical disbeliever in ghosts, how he met the horseman returning from his foray into Sleepy Hollow, and was obliged to get up behind him, how they galloped over bush and brake, over hill and swamp, until they reached the bridge, when the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton, threw old Brower into the brook, and sprang away over the treetops with a clap of thunder. While Crane's own encounter with the Headless Horseman may have just been a prank by one Brombones, Legends of the Wild Hunt and its spectral riders would have made it a terrifying encounter for him regardless. And it certainly was the belief among the people of Sleepy Hollow that Crane had vanished so suddenly because the horseman, aka the Wild Hunt, had snatched him up and carried him away. Whatever the horseman of Sleepy Hollow's true nature, the story still contains references to many common beliefs and superstitions surrounding not only the Wild Hunt itself, but just which concern spirits and the undead, especially the one about not being able to cross running water, where we see as the horseman having to stop at this bridge which goes over a creek. I think it might be in part because water can somehow disrupt or ground spiritual or ghostly energy, and it may also act as a boundary between worlds. In many cultures and world myths, we see that there is a river which is said to separate the realm of the living from the realm of the dead. So perhaps a river in the mortal realm acts as a similar boundary for spirits when they are on this plane. It's also a known feature of Odin's steed Sleipnir, which in fact means slipper, that it is able to slip between the worlds and allow Odin to travel to realms where even other gods cannot go, such as Helheim. This ghostly horse may also symbolize the spirit's ability to move from the realm of the dead into the realm of the living, at least during those witching hours, those liminal times when the boundary between the worlds is thinnest and easiest to pass through. Another curious trait of the Headless Horseman is that, unlike other ghosts, he does not haunt a specific building or even location, but can roam the roads and woods of Sleepy Hollow almost as he pleases. While it's a common belief that many spirits or supernatural beings cannot set foot on hallowed ground, which is blessed ground, churches, churchyards, holy places, etc., the Headless Horseman was rumored to hitch his horse in the church graveyard each night. Another sign, perhaps, that he has unique abilities amongst spirits and can go where others cannot, much as Odin and Sleipnir do. So, is the Headless Horseman Odin? Not directly, no. At least, it does not seem to have been a conscious reference on Irving's part. However, his extensive research of, and drawing on, of Germanic folk tales, which do stem from pre-Christian beliefs, in Odin as this ferryman of the dead and leader of the Wild Hunt does make it an interesting proposition to consider.